Is he going to William Wallace if we win the awards?
Oh, that would actually be hilarious.
I think a lot of instructors say, well, I do that. I absolutely do give my people that opportunity to drive independently. And my question would be to go and reflect on that and ask yourself, do you? Do you really?
Now is the time that I should be turning. How do you decide that? And I think it's really, Phil is really confused here because he's like, I don't know how I do it, Diana.
Inspire Instructor Training Podcast, where the learning never stops.
Welcome to the Inspire Instructor Training Podcast. I am joined today by the lovely Diana again.
Hello.
I feel like we haven't spoken in ages, so this is just going to be like a podcast where we're just like catch up.
That's so true.
Instead of catching up, do you want to catch everyone else up with? Did you like that link? I like that link. Catch everyone else up with what we've got coming up.
I love that link, and thank goodness I was frantically checking to see what we were coming up, what we were doing over the next couple of weeks. Okay, so this podcast is going out the same day as our Zoom session, which will be tonight, March the 12th. And it's 8 pitfalls to avoid for part 3 and standards check success. So if you have had that letter or you are preparing for your part 3, then join us on that. You can sign up as a member, it's £20 per month, or you could just join for a one-off Zoom. We also have on the 26th of March, learning from the positives. In a fault-fixed society that we seem to be surrounded by, we wanted to put a spin on it and help you guys really exploit and celebrate the pupils' positives and how that can just be, you know, equally, if not a better learning opportunity. So we're going to share how to do that on our Zoom on the 26th of March. And then the day after that, we have a masterclass with Intelligent Instructor on the 27th of March on how to teach skills within topics. So if you are lucky enough to be one of their members, then join us for that. And of course, we're going to be at the conference on the 23rd of March, which is really coming up very, very, very quickly. There will be the gala dinner on the 22nd. And then the conference on the 23rd with a wealth of speakers that I'm actually very, very excited to tune in with as well. So that is our whistle stop tour.
I'm looking forward to the conference. I think it was really good last year. It was nice to have the meal the night before and just chill out and I suppose sort of kind of, I don't even like calling it networking, but just chat to people, but without the pressure of, oh, am I missing this talk or what do I need to see here? It was just, let's have a chat. Got to know a few people. And yeah, it's a much more relaxed environment, which is nice.
I like that. I'm especially looking forward to a hug from Rachel, who is just quite possibly one of the nicest human beings you'll ever meet. So it's always nice.
It's very lovely.
And my
Okay,
hubby is wearing a kilt. So that's always cause for celebration.
right now or
Not right now, because that would be weird. But he's joining us, and we're up for some awards.
is he going to William Wallace if we win the awards?
Oh, that would actually be hilarious. But those of you who know Stuart know that that's just never going to happen in a million years' time.
Amazing. This is not where I thought the podcast would go.
But I think it'll be nice. It will be nice.
Right, shall we go into Phil's thoughts, which ironically weren't about kilts.
Or my husband's backside.
Yeah. So I went this week. I was away doing the confident drivers, dealing with anxious drivers and neurodiverse pupils diploma. So a 3-day course, which was brilliant. Like anybody who is interested in supporting their anxious drivers. I think particularly if you teach automatic, I would almost say this course is a no-brainer. Absolutely love it. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was great the way that they um, delivered it as well. So it's a like, really enjoyable 3 days. But that's not my Phil's thoughts. My Phil's thoughts is from that course. And they were talking about driving independently. And it was quite interesting. It was one of several times during the few days that I accidentally said something that was then going to come up later on in the course. A bit like I do to you all the time, actually. And then they were like, hold that thought, Phil. So we were talking about independent driving. Now, I think the problem with independent driving, that phrase has kind of been stolen by the driving test. So now if I said to somebody, oh, let's go do independent driving, they think of doing a sat nav drive or following signposts because it's from the test. So they flipped it around, and this is why I sort of kind of stopped, like said the phrase, and I was like, oh well, it's actually driving independently, isn't it? And they have that in their course that I didn't recognize that it was later on. I was like, oopsie. Um, so, but I love the concept, and I think again, actually, if I said to people, go and deliver a lesson or a section of your lesson where your pupil is driving independently, I think a lot of instructors will say, well, I do that. I absolutely do give my pupil that opportunity to drive independently. And my question would be to go and reflect on that and ask yourself, do you? Do you really? And or are you chucking in questions? Like we had this chat when I first did this and said, like, are you asking, like, what's your thoughts? And then are you asking those, what's your thoughts at specific times to raise their attention? I think even actually, are you getting them to reflect on their drive as they're going along? Because suddenly now we're adding to that focus. We're maybe even fixing as we go. And I think there's a place for, particularly when they're sort of kind of getting closer to test, to just shut up and let them drive. And I think we do this with mock tests, to be fair. A lot of instructors will completely stay silent and let them drive for a mock. But there's an element of a mock test where it's a bit sanitized and it's a bit forced. This is more, and I did it with my pupil today actually, which is why I wanted to kind of talk about it, where I didn't set it up as a mock or anything. I just set it up as let's go for a drive. We were doing rural roads for the first time, but I knew she could do this independently. Um, and I asked her where she wanted to go. She needed to work on the theory a little bit. And I said, where do you want to go to do the theory? And she said, well, the moors. Let's go on the moors. So I got a great photo of us doing theory on the moors, this like great scenic view. And I let her drive there without any support. And we were just chatting on the way there. And some would maybe think that's not a very good driving lesson because I wasn't getting her thinking and doing all this sort of stuff. But once we pulled over, I was then asked her a few questions and got her to reflect on her drive and what she could have maybe done differently. But actually, what happened was if there were occasions where, and of course I would have stepped in if something big happened, but there were occasions where it was a bit wobbly, or there was like she could have done something, could have done a gear change earlier or something like that. And I just didn't say anything. I let her sort of kind of handle it the way she would have had to if I wasn't there, because it was amazing how she then you could see her. She sort of kind of was, like messed that up. I didn't say anything, and then next time she didn't mess it up because she reflected, and that tells me that she's going to get better when I'm not there. And
Mm.
I think that's where this comes from, is this concept of almost challenging them or showing them they can teach themselves, certainly once they've got to that kind of that level. And that gives me the confidence that this pupil is going to be safe post-test because she's able to, in the moment, reflect on something she did, learn from it, and not do it next time without me saying anything or getting involved. Um, so yeah, I think that's my challenge for everyone is to go and like set it up. Don't just suddenly not stop talking to your pupils. But set it up as like I want you to like drive as if I'm not here. Or drive as if and maybe set it up so that you're going somewhere. So like let the pupil do the directions. I think that's a huge part of it because if you're doing the directions, suddenly you are getting involved because you're now going take the next road on the right and they're like, oh, there's a junction coming up, or oh, there's a roundabout coming up. Let them do the directions. If you have to use sat nav for that, that's fine. But even better, just go take them somewhere they know where they're going so they can do the route. Yeah, and really just like shut up, basically, unless it gets dangerous, and just let them explore, even if they get it wrong, as long as again it's not dangerous. And see what happens. I would actually love for everybody to come back and like comment on the post and let us know how it went.
I have a question.
Yep.
How did you know, or how that she could do it independently? What gave you that confidence?
Mhm. That's a good question. Because I think actually because of the way we've been through our lessons, so she's showing me that in her driving, that she's got stuff to work on, to be fair. Like we worked on this last lesson, but she still comes into things a bit too fast and therefore sometimes messes up the gears, but she rescues herself. And I want to improve that and we will work on that. But there was an element of it wasn't ever going to be necessarily dangerous, it was just clumsy. So
Mm,
there's that side of it. I think also we have worked and she's probably one of my first pupils who I've really, really done this with since coming back from having a bit of break of teaching learners, where we nailed the car control, like really nailed it before moving on to other stuff. And I think that gives me the confidence that she was just going to be able to handle stuff. So and she's a pretty sort of kind of an aware driver anyway. And if I've got pupils who aren't, then I would get them to that point basically.
mm,
So generally, when we're driving around, I'm not jumping in and saving her all the time. It's more she's a pretty good thinker with driving. Again, we've worked on that. Like we've worked on awareness. We've worked on she wasn't very good at anticipating stuff, and so we've worked on that. Um, yeah. So I suppose it was just that. I felt safe enough that she wouldn't do anything silly,
yeah,
basically.
yeah. No, I hear you. I just thought it was important that everybody else recognized what it was that gave you that confidence, because I know that I know that old me, competitive me, would have heard, well, Phil lets his pupils go without any support on a country road. I'll do the same too. But I love the fact that there was a backstory there that gave you that confidence. And of course, I knew that would be the case. So, um, yeah,
Yeah,
thank.
you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. There is an element there of yeah, don't let them. Don't like. I wouldn't want my pupil to have a bad experience of driving,
Mhm.
because that sticks.
Yeah,
So this is about, and actually, what happened was she had a really positive experience of driving, where even though it wasn't a perfect drive, she was able to kind of go, I just drove myself to Dartmoor. And I think she's actually going to Dartmoor later with her mum. Um, so gives her that confidence as well. And I think that's a big part of this is it means that when they go into the test, but actually more importantly, when they pass the driving test and she wants to go off to Dartmoor, it's not a scary thing anymore. It's not she's not even if you've done it before with them, she's not going into it. Well, I've done it before, but my instructor was helping me. She can go
yeah,
into that going, okay, it wasn't great, but I've driven to Dartmoor before, so I can probably do it now.
yeah, absolutely. Love that.
Shall we do? Actually, do you want to do Diana's dig deeper? Because I was going to answer the question and I've already talked a lot. So should we split it up a little bit and do Diana's
Yeah,
first?
sure. So, as part of our Diana Digs Deeper section today, I wanted to actually suggest that you guys dig deeper with yourself. And what I mean by that is when you are looking to introduce topics or exploit a learning point with a pupil, it can be quite hard to think about what it is that you take into account or that you need them to take into account for the learning to truly happen. And one of the ways that I do this, and I help support PDIs do this, is I have them look at how they make their decisions when it comes to meeting traffic or turning left, or whether they decide, how do they decide what gear to be in? How do they decide whether to dip the clutch slightly? How are they making those choices every day? Because actually, we need to start from there and work backwards. Because too often, we will ask fantastic questions, but we ourselves don't necessarily understand exactly how it is that we're making these choices because it's been sat in our subconscious competence for such a long period of time. So we almost have to extract that knowledge from ourselves so that we can support the pupils. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that you ask questions based on already knowing the answer. But what this does do is help you formulate your questions around the learning points that you need them to understand. So let's take meeting traffic, for example. When I'm looking at that as a lesson plan, I might look to set my own objectives for that. And I need the pupil from that lesson to understand who has priority, how are they coming up with an escape plan? So where would the options be? What would the escape plan look like? Is it slow down? Is it speed up? Is it pull over to the left? Is it hold back opposite a space? Is it hold back entirely? So I need to really dig deeper with myself on how I make those decisions so that I have a bank of information that I can send to those questions around. But it's really important in that instance to also not dismiss what the pupil is taking into account that you may or may not have considered in your experience, because actually what they're bringing to the table is their own life experiences. It may be that they have a better understanding of, I don't know, the flow of traffic in a particular area because that's what happens, and what have you. I'm kind of going off on a tangent here. So what I mean by that is don't necessarily just stick to what you think is what they need to know, but absolutely have a deeper understanding of how you make your choices. Let's take something simple like a left turn. How do you know when to turn? What bit of that road or that journey or that environment says now is the time that I should be turning? How do you decide that? And I think it's really like Phil looks really confused here because he's like, I don't know. I don't know how I do it, Diana. But I think it's really important that you understand how you do it so that you can support the pupil in working out how they will do it. Now, that's not necessarily saying that they will do it in the same way as you, but it gives you some information that you can call upon if needed. And I'll give you the perfect example. I remember asking a pupil a question, and I thought I was comfortable with these types of questions. I know I've said this before. And I said to them, and it was to do with moving off, and I said, so how are you deciding when not to go? And they looked at me and went, I don't know. I went, right, okay, so let's just move off now. Now's the time. Now's the time to go. And I thought about that question. I asked that question, and actually the pupil didn't know, and neither did I. That's why I think it's really important for you to be able to really dig down with yourself and understand exactly what it is you consider when driving in different environments. Do it per topic, per skill, per subject, whatever it is that's working for you, and extract that information from yourself so that you can start to build your own lesson plans and the things and objectives that you would like to cover with your pupil. What's your thoughts on that? Because I think you look puzzled through some of that.
I was trying to work out how I do
The
those things. And then I was thinking, certainly with the turn in, because I was thinking, how do I know when to turn the wheel? And I think the answer's there's too many factors. Like it's too minute to actually, and if you think about it, you probably get it wrong,
Yeah.
which is why when learners think about it, they get it wrong. So I carried on thinking, then I thought, actually, the thing I do is just look into where I'm going.
Hmm.
And then I think, okay, well, that's what I teach my pupils. So I think I do that in that sense. I don't teach my pupils a turning point, or
Yeah.
I certainly don't tell them to look at the curb, because they'll drive into the curb. I tell them what I do. So you're right. I tell them what I do. And what I do is I look into the road and turn the wheel. And then I make adjustments based on where the car's then going. So if it's, and I think with experience, you don't need to make very many adjustments because you've
Mm.
done it so many times. You look at it and you just go, that's, I don't know, a third of a turn on your
Mm.
steering wheel. You don't think of it like that, but you just know. Like as an experienced driver, I know I chuck this much steering on, it goes around the corner.
Yeah.
And learners need to build up that skill. The way they build up that skill is by looking where they're going. The one I did then take it back to was with speed. So the speed on the approach to the corner, how am I working that out?
Hmm.
And again, I'm probably considering things like how far can I see around that corner? How hazardous is the corner? Are there any pedestrians? Build up a traffic. So it just there's lots of different things.
Wide.
What, sorry?
How wide is the
How
corner?
wide's the corner? Yeah, because potentially stuff on the other side of the road. Yeah, so I am taking lots of things into account, and that I would go through that with my pupils. The bit where I actually just want to sort of kind of throw caution to with this. It's a bit like with yours when you said when I gave him mine and you were like, "Be careful, guys! Don't just listen to Phil." The I'm my concern with that, and I get where you're coming from, and actually I do that, and I suggest people do that during their part two training. A lot of time, actually,
Mhm.
is where this should happen. If it hasn't happened during your part two training because you just practice driving, then absolutely go and like really cement this in your mind. My concern is if I go into a lesson about junctions, and you did cover this by like listening to your pupils, but if you go into your lesson with, I want my learners to know this, this, and this, and this by the end of today's session, your questions, your prompts, your conversations will be very led towards that.
Uh,
Whereas
yeah.
I want my, I go into that lesson going, I want my people to be able to drive around the corner, basically. How they do that, I really don't care.
Yeah.
How they've come about to that, I don't care. Now, the bit where I then, and it's still important to know this stuff because
Hmm.
I think the bit where that comes in is when they're struggling. I think if I tell my people, let's go take the next road on the left, and they turn the
Yes.
corner, appropriate speed, right time, looking where they're supposed to be, I am not chucking all that stuff in because that is just going to that's going to they're going to overthink it and they're going to start
Yeah.
getting it wrong. I'm like, okay, this pupil's accidentally getting it right. Let's just leave that.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas if they are going wide around the corner, that's when it's important, first of all, to sort of say, okay, where were you looking? But I wouldn't know to ask where were you looking if I didn't think my answer was looking to the road is the fix, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting because I think I would potentially, how I help do that is I will say, I noticed we went wide round the corner. Give me some reasons why you think that was.
Yep.
So I would do that. But I would have, and I'm really glad you brought this up because I would have that bank of information in my head so that if they didn't have the skills to understand or reflect yet, because those are important, but at that moment, at that time, if they didn't quite know, then I would ask them to have a guess, like, just throw some ideas at me. And if they still didn't know, then I've got a bank of information in which I use. And I think that's where I'm really keen to almost have that as a backup plan. It's a backup plan for a backup plan. And I hear you when you say like you don't almost want that fixed conversation. But and actually I think it's important to note as well, these are objectives overarching. as well, that I want them to come away at the end of the lesson understanding, not necessarily as little Diana puppets, which would be wonderful, but but it would be beneficial for them to know or have a clear understanding of, not necessarily verbatim what I do. Does that make sense?
And I think that bit where you've said if it wasn't going well, you would dig into their solutions and stuff. That's what I wanted to kind of make sure we
Yeah.
got across, because I think that's crucial. That we don't just go, oh, I know, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
try and fix it.
Mhm.
And yeah, this is that balance between having an idea, but also letting the pupil work it out for themselves. And then when they're lost, I would probably add one more step into your thing, and you maybe even already do this actually. So you said you'd ask them like, what do they think they cause that? And then you would encourage them to just come up with some, like, throw some ideas at me, like
Yeah,
nothing, no bad ideas, that sort of kind of thing. I like that because again, it gives them that freedom to just say stuff, which
absolutely.
is great. The other one I would then do actually is if they're really stuck, before I would go into can I check in some options, is go, shall we go do it again? Now you know,
Hmm.
and then
Nice.
maybe you can notice what happened. And now what's ironic about that is quite often that fixes it.
It's so funny you should say that, isn't it? Because that's exactly what I did today. And yeah, yeah, you're right. It's an interesting one. I think I play around with that depending on the pupil. But you're right, maybe that should be a little bit more of a go-to. Um, I suppose it depends on the situation. If it's easy to look round, if it's going to add a whole load of stuff. But yeah, 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 yeah. I literally had that same situation today, which is interesting.
It's ironic because like, you send them off to go and find out like where it's going wrong, and actually quite often it makes it go right.
Yeah,
But then you've got a whole bunch of new questions. Okay, so what did you do differently?
yeah. And it keeps it positive,
Yeah,
like we've said, which will probably come up in a couple of weeks' time on our Zoom.
yeah. Right, I think we should skip the question, and if you want some of our Q&As, come join the membership and join our live Q&As on a Monday.
Yeah, only
Just
because we're about to do it.
mainly because we're running out of time and we've got 7 minutes before we need to actually go and do a live Q&A. So yeah, shall we say goodbye to everyone?
Yeah. So thank you for listening to our little snapshot today, and we hope we've inspired you to be the best instructor you can be.
Inspire Instructor Training Podcast, where the learning never stops.